Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Broken Sword Shadow of the Templars Director's Cut for PC, Nintendo DS, Nintendo Wii, iPhones, iPod Touches, iPads, and Mac. If you haven't seen my review of Broken Sword Shadow of the Templars, or Broken Sword Circle of Blood, depending on what you want to call it, then you might want to go watch that right now, because this is basically a remake of that. And it was first released in 2009 for Wii and Nintendo DS, and then they released it the following year for iPod and iPhone, and eventually iPad devices, and then they finally released it in 2010 for PC and Mac. So it's been basically a casual game from the start, whereas the original was not a casual game. So if you watch my review of the original game and then you watch this, then you'll notice the differences. Now, one of the most obvious differences from the original game are the graphics. Now, while the sprites that move around for the animations of characters and such haven't really changed all that much, they've been sharpened a little bit, and they've also been blurred a little bit, just because that's the way you do things now. That with the anti-aliasing of sprites, it's kind of weird. But that really hasn't changed much. What has changed are they've added in a few little touches here and there. There's some animated cutscenes that they've thrown in there that weren't in the original game, and it's glaringly obvious the difference between them, because these cutscenes are done in the new art style, whereas the old cutscenes were in that cartoony art style, and they're still kept in the game. And so you have a very stark contrast between these cutscenes, and then you also have a stark contrast between the portraits for the characters when they're talking, and the just the everything else going on in the game at the same time, because the art styles don't exactly match up. Now, that said, the new art style isn't that bad. It's just not all that great. They've also removed things like they've removed some of the blood. In fact, I believe they've removed all of the blood. And they've removed a few animations here and there, but they really haven't done all that much with the graphics to the point where it's completely unrecognizable. I mean, it's still Broken Sword Shadow of the Templars / Circle of Blood, but the graphics are a little bit sharper, and to be honest with you, though, it really doesn't appeal to me all that much. I actually prefer the original art style, because it was just much more of an achievement at the time. Now, likewise, the sound design really hasn't changed much either. They kept in all the music, they've also kept in a lot of the voice acting, and it shows the difference between the new stuff they've recorded and the old stuff, because the newer stuff is a lot sharper, it's a lot clearer. The older stuff is still muddled and kind of low quality sound compared to that. And so it's a kind of a jarring thing, really. I mean, you play the bits that are that have been added into the game first, and so when you're sitting there listening to this high quality audio and everything, and then you cut to the parts where they actually started the game in the original game, and all of a sudden it's this kind of low quality sound, and it just hits you like a ton of bricks. It's very odd and very jarring. In addition, some of the new voice acting that they've done isn't very good. In fact, it's worse than the original game, and that's a problem, because the original game didn't really have great voice acting. It had good for the time, and it's really good for the time, actually, but they never really fixed any of the things that were glaringly obviously annoying about the original game. Like the Irish accents, they didn't even bother fixing those. They didn't bother fixing some of the French stuff. It's really just kind of odd why they didn't just go in and redo all of the voice acting altogether. I really don't understand that. But as for everything else, it sounds about the same. Now, if you haven't played the original Broken Sword Shadow of the Templars / Circle of Blood, then you don't know what this is. Basically, it's a point-and-click adventure game that centers around the story of George Stobart, who is this American lawyer vacationing in Paris, and he gets embroiled in this conspiracy kind of thing, and ends up investigating into that, and it goes from there. Now, if you haven't played the original game and you've only played Director's Cut, you wouldn't know that the actual main protagonist is George Stobart. You'd think it was Nico, Nicole Collard, who is the reporter that is basically George's sidekick and basically the brains of the operation, really. Although George has his moments too, because the Director's Cut portrays George as much more of a dweeb and much less the protagonist than Nico does. Be perfectly honest with you, mostly because the game actually starts with you playing as Nico, and the original game never had you playing as Nico at all. So it's really confusing when you go back and forth between these protagonists, and you're really not sure which one is the actual person the story is focusing on. Because you play as George through most of the game, but every so often you'll come across a segment where you're playing as Nico. It's like, wait, what? And that's kind of the story with this game. Director's Cut adds in a bunch of stuff that wasn't in the original game. Well, not really a bunch of stuff, but some things that weren't in the original game. And they really disrupt the flow of the game, they disrupt the flow of the story, and they just don't feel right. You play through these segments, and they're full of tedious puzzles that really don't have all that much effect on you. They explain things that really don't need to be explained, because you're sitting there like, okay, this kind of removes a lot of the mystery. You don't really need to explain this. And that's kind of how the whole game is, really. The added-in segments just disrupt the whole game. They don't feel right. I mean, like, if you've seen my Let's Play of this, then there's a puzzle towards the beginning of the game where all you do is slide around blocks until eventually you can get the lock opened. And that wasn't in the original game. That whole segment wasn't. And you know that puzzle is extremely tedious, and that's basically what they added in, was tedious puzzles. And the original game had a bunch of witty puzzles, ones that actually made sense in combination with the story and what was going on, that sort of thing. So basically what Director's Cut is an attempt to casualize the game, just for like the DS and the Wii mainly, because those were the original devices this was made for. And then it was made for like the iPod, iPhone, iPad devices. And so those are the casual devices. You'd expect it to be made easier. I mean, like they added in a notebook that basically keeps track of all your clues for you, that's actually a pretty nice feature. I'll admit that. It is kind of annoying, though, to be perfectly honest with you, because it makes the game much easier. They also added in little blue highlighting circles for things that can be clicked on, and you can't turn them off. So if you want to turn that off and make the game a little bit more difficult, you can't. So you're sitting there like, okay, this game is way too easy, and that's the problem with it. Director's Cut is just too easy. You play the original game, I mean, it's not particularly hard to begin with, but it's more difficult in the original version because you don't really know what you're supposed to do until you find it. And in this one, it's basically everything is spelled out for you with a big, hey, click on this thing. And that just bothers me, to be perfectly honest with you. That said, it is the same game overall. But still, the additions they threw in there just really don't feel right. They don't play very well. And so I have to recommend the original version over this. And the only way you can really get that anymore, without the obvious illegal reasons, well, methods, I mean, is GOG.com, because they offer both the Director's Cut and the original game bundled together. And you can just install the original game and play that and say, hey, I bought this for that instead. And that's kind of how I feel about this game. You shouldn't really bother with it unless you just want to see what they added in, or if you've only got like a DS, a Wii, or an iPhone or iPad or iPod Touch device that you want to play it on. I mean, if you've got the PC, then you might as well just get it on PC, get the GOG version, and just play through the original game, because the newer version just isn't that great. They also censored some of the violence, probably for the Nintendo markets. For instance, they've basically taken out all the blood. Well, not all of it, but most of the blood. They've taken out some not too graphic, violent scenes. I mean, the game still would have gotten teen anyway. But basically, they've just censored the game quite a bit. It's pretty much impossible to die in this game, unless you like really have no clue what you're doing and manage to break the game, because that's really the only way I can think of that you can die in this game, is if you break the game somehow. So overall, Director's Cut really isn't very good. If you've played the original game and you want to check out the Director's Cut just to see what it's like, or if you haven't played the original game or Director's Cut and you just want to get it for like DS or Wii or one of the iPad devices or something like that, then sure, go for it. But if you're a fan of the original game and you have a PC, or if you have a PC, you know of GOG.com, then just get it on there and play through the original version, because the Director's Cut really isn't that good. So overall, I give it a 2.5 out of 5, and thanks for watching.